and unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, I can see the participants here. And the recording is on. Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the first session of this 2020 National Zoom Conference of Haiku Society of America. I'm Himanshu Vyas from India, your host for the session. We can't start the conversation with a comment on the day's weather in an online conference because almost all of us are scattered across the globe under different skies. But we all are together in this haiku universe. Before I invite our guest, please give me a minute to pass on some important instruction for participants, although Jay has already said a few of them. To avoid the bandwidth problems, do not run programs in the background on your computer. And please keep the videos always off and the microphone also on off. And I will also switch my microphone off during the presentation of Charlotte. And please book a question at the end of the session after the presentation is over. That's in the chat box, and kindly address the questions along with your name to me, that is the host. You can do that in the options box in the chat section. The questions are to be addressed to the host, not to everyone. And please feel free to set the chat to individual instead of chat to everyone. And if you can't ask the question in the allotted time, you'll have email address of our presenter. You can contact them later also. Now, we are delighted to have with us eminent author and blogger, Charlotte Digregorio. And she will give her presentation on Build Your Haiku Network through the art of blogging. Let me give her a very brief introduction of Charlotte. Charlotte Digregorio blogs at charlottedigregorio.wordpress.com and runs the Daily Haiku among many features. Blogging for 5.5 years, she has readers from about 110 countries and followers from 60 of them. She is the author of Haiku and Senryu, a simple guide for all, Ripples of Air, Poems of Healing, an inspirational reference book, and 5 other titles. She was recently honored for her lifelong achievements in the literary arts by the governor of Illinois. She served as an officer of Haiku Society of America for many years. Her passion is to promote the literary arts. Her poetry activities include these: translating poetry books from Italian into English, a traveling haiga show that is featured at libraries, hospitals, corporate centers, and park districts, among several venues, writing a poetry column for Winnetka Living, a lifestyle magazine in Illinois, hosting a radio poetry program on public broadcasting, and giving haiku workshops for students in the public schools. With that, we are happy to have Charlotte with us. Charlotte, kindly, you're welcome to give your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Can you hear me? Am I loud enough? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Himanshu, and coming to us from India on a Saturday night. Your generous amount of time and your efforts. I appreciate it so much. And thank you, Jay Friedenberg, for putting together this conference. I can only imagine how much time it involved, and just a tremendous amount of time. Well, I'm hoping that you read the presentation summary to my talk. And basically, the gist of it is that you really need to reach people in an effective way by blogging when you involve their participation. And you have to ask yourself, why do people need your blog? They may like it, but it's more important for them to need it. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I've had my blog now for 11 years, but the past 5.5 years, it's been focused on haiku. And I spend as much as 10 or 12 hours a week on my blog. And I call it, excuse me, my catch-all blog, as I celebrate all kinds of genres of writing, in addition to running the Daily Haiku. And the Daily Haiku reaches bilingual poets from all over the world, 60 countries and 50 states. Now, when I started this blog on haiku, I asked myself, how does my blog benefit the readers and the followers? And that's really important, because you want to benefit yourself last. It's important to benefit the bloggers first. And if it's a writer's blog, does it enhance the visibility of the art of writing? And in this case, does my blog enhance the visibility of haiku? And so I run haiku, that's my mainstay, but I also include other features for haikuists. A lot of the haikuists I found who read and follow my blog are involved in other genres of writing. So it's a catch-all blog. I try to satisfy their interest for other genres too, but they know that they can count on the Daily Haiku every day when I run my blog. So how do you attract readers to your blog? If you have a haiku blog, how do you attract readers? Say you're just starting out. Well, the obvious way is to start inviting all your contacts to your blog, your family, your friends, people at your jobs, people at writers' organizations and writers' newsletters. And you can say, well, you know, people at my job or my family don't enjoy haiku. That may be the case, but you need to get some followers behind you in the beginning for PR purposes. So have them follow you, even if they don't, you know, log on to your blog.
Get out of here! God damn you!
Oh, I think I'm hearing somebody else talking. Anyway, so when you invite people on your blog,
Excuse me, Charlotte. Excuse me, Charlotte. Sorry for interrupting. Please unmute yourself.
So you didn't hear me?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
You didn't hear me before? Okay, I hope I'm unmuted now. I don't know if you missed a lot of what I said. I'm hoping you didn't miss a lot of what I said, but the point is to invite people to your blog, encourage them to submit their poetry. So it's a forum, because if you're just running your own poetry, people aren't incentivized to log in all the time. So it's very, very important. So keep people coming to your blog by running their poetry and running the poetry of haiku poets that they might know or who've been writing a long time and their names they've been familiar with. You can't be self-serving in your blog and promote your own poetry all the time. I think that's very, very important. If your readers are beginning haiku poets and they haven't published anything, get them involved in answering survey questions. Like you can ask them, why do you like to read haiku? And you can tell them to answer the question in one sentence. Never impose on your readers' time. You know, if you ask them a survey question to get them involved and you ask them to write a paragraph, they're not going to be motivated to do that. I can say this, in the 5.5 years that I've been running my haiku blog, I have never once run my haiku on the Daily Haiku, because the blog is for my readers. It's not to promote me. Now, you can get people to read and follow your blog if you make it really hard for them not to. You know, think of that point. It's important to really, you know, and that's why I run a daily blog. It's important to get people to log in on a daily basis and not lose interest. So I'm really religious about posting everything each day. I try to give readers as much exposure as I can when I run their poems. I announce their poems on Facebook and Twitter with a link to the blog. I figure that my readers and followers, I treat them like they're kings. It's sort of like the customer is king. The reader and followers are kings. So get your readers to become followers by either running their work or running essays. I run a lot of essays teaching people how to write haiku, how to publish haiku. I teach them how to publicize their efforts in haiku if they're doing workshops or if they're doing exhibits of their poetry. A lot of haiku poets don't know anything about publicity. I have a background, I started out in life as a journalist and a public relations director, so I'm really big on publicity and publicizing your work as a writer. And a lot of experienced haiku poets don't know how to publicize themselves, so they read my blog to find out how to publicize themselves and their work. I run a lot of essays on that. And how to publicize their haiku chapbooks or their books. So I try to appeal to all kinds of haiku poets at any level, whether they're beginners or experienced poets. So your goal is to make your blog accessible to everyone and offer them an education on how they can do better as haiku poets or in publicizing their work or anything that's related to haiku. So give them tips to learn how to, I give my readers tips on how to improve their haiku. Like oftentimes I'll invite an experienced haikuist to answer questions on, you know, how do you write haiku and how do you get it published? So I try to make my blog very informative for people. I also run book reviews. A lot of the haiku poets that follow and read my blog have produced books, so I try to get them involved in submitting their books, and I review them. I also run essays, as I said, on publicizing. how do you, for example, I've run essays on how do you approach a librarian to get them to feature your workshop, your haiku workshop. A lot of haiku poets don't know this. So I involve a lot of information about publicizing your work on my blog. One thing you're going to find is that the experienced haikuists who log into your blog love to comment on other people's poems. And they do this not only because they enjoy haiku, but they do this because they can work in plugs about their books or their own poetry, which they sometimes do. So as a blogger, it's very important to respond to everybody's comments. Even simply by just saying, thank you, Mary, for commenting. You want to keep your readers involved, and you want to keep a dialogue going between your readers and you. Some beginning poets have commented to me that they don't understand a poem. And so sometimes I invite an experienced haikuist to explain what the poem is about. So you get everybody involved in your blog. And if you start out running just haiku to get people reading and to become followers, find out what other genres of poetry they write. Tap into other genres of writing. Maybe they even write flash fiction. So do they, for example, if they write tanka, you can include tanka. You can include haiban. If they write haiban, you can include free verse and sonnets and all kinds of forms of poetry on your blog too, whatever your blog readers write. So that involves getting to know your readers and getting to know what they like. And that involves growing your followers. If you expand beyond haiku into tanka or haiban or something else, you grow your followers. And that should be your goal. I mean, obviously you want as many people following your blog and reading it as possible. So that's how you do it. So how do you measure success on your blog? The simple answer is, do most people, are you increasing the number of people who are reading your blog? That's a simple answer. And if you expand the appeal of your blog and you start including a lot of different features, book reviews, author interviews, writer interviews, then your chances are good that you're going to get more and more followers. If I ran just the daily haiku every day, I wouldn't have the number of followers that I have now. So it's important to keep looking for fresh features to run. You ask yourself what you would want to see on a blog, and then you'll key into what other people might want to see on it too. Always keep asking yourself, am I doing as much as I can to get readers and followers? Now, I personally measure success if I can get 150 hits a day. Now, sometimes if the poet who's appearing on the daily haiku is a well-known poet, I can get as many as 350 hits a day. But if I get less than 100 hits a day, that's disappointing to me since I've been running my blog, my haiku blog, for 5.5 years. Now, it takes years to develop a large following. Don't expect to get hundreds of followers, the first year. It just doesn't happen that way. Let's be honest, poetry and haiku is a niche market. It doesn't have the appeal that a self-help blog would have or a business advice blog. So, you're going to have to really work at getting followers. And don't just make it a blog for your friends who write good haiku. Be all-inclusive. Really work at getting beginning poets to join in. I think a haiku blog naturally hooks beginning writers because they see it as being doable. They're writing a 3-line poem and they think, it's not going to involve, it's not writing a novel or anything like that. So you'll get people following you. Okay, what isn't effective blogging? you know, sometimes it's what I see too often. The posting of all your work and not creating a dialogue with other poets. Now, I know some haiku poets who do post their poems exclusively and don't post the poems of other people. I guess that's fine, but as long as you can have a dialogue going with other people, you know, ask them questions. Do they understand your poems? Get them involved somehow, because if you don't get your readers and followers involved, chances are good that they're not going to follow you on a regular basis. You know, people can read your poems in Frog Pond, so why should they log into your blog every day or every week or every month when you post something? They don't have an incentive to do that unless you're getting them involved. Posting just your work becomes tiresome for them. They've got too many other distractions. So maybe if you're posting just your work, do the instructive essays, you know, write instructive essays, or give your followers and readers, you know, tips on writing, tips that you have found to make them, tips that you have found that have, you know, have gotten your poetry published, that sort of thing. Avoid, as I said in my outline, shameless promotion of your own poetry. And if you don't get many likes for your poems, and you don't get many followers, that's an indication that, you know, maybe you're not doing the right thing. Maybe you're not reaching who you're supposed to be reaching. I recently saw a blog, and it wasn't by a haiku poet, it was by another poet who wrote free verse. And I noticed that that poet posted a free verse poem from his vast portfolio every single day, you know, for the past, you know, 6 months. And that poet also mentioned, oh, I won another award. Well, you know, that's not going to get people tuned in. I mean, you're not going to get people to keep reading your work if you do that. I mean, they can, you know, read your work in a journal. They're not incentivized to keep tuning in every day. As I have never run my haiku on the Daily Haiku, never once in 5.5 years. And people ask me why I don't do that. And I tell them that my blog is about them. It's not about me. Now, I do publicize my books from time to time, and my blog helps me sell books, and it helps me promote my poetry art exhibits, and it helps me promote my workshops and that I give at libraries and organizations. I do post events that I give that are free to the public. I'm not asking people for money, so I'm not being self-serving by saying, you know, come to my workshop. It's a free workshop. Or, you know, I'm not telling people to pay to come to see an exhibit that I'm doing. I hold exhibits at libraries and hospitals and park districts, places where people can walk in and see them. I heavily promote my readers and followers, and I think if you heavily promote your readers and followers with writer interviews, book reviews, run their notices if they're giving a workshop. Let them know where you're giving that workshop. Let them know if you have an anthology that you're producing and that you'd like them to submit to that anthology. And also invite your readers and followers to submit news about their anthologies or their journals that they're editing and that they're looking for submissions for. You know, if people want to read your poetry, they can buy your chapbook. They don't need to tune into your blog every day. Okay, so what are some of the popular features that I found that readers appreciate? Let's just review a few things. My goal is to offer features that people will log into that are benefits oriented. And people say, well, what does that mean? What does benefits oriented mean? Do your features teach people how to do something? That's a benefit. So focus on that. Are you running a wide variety of haiku that appeals to both beginning haikuists and experienced haikuists? With beginners, you want to make them realize that they can succeed at writing haiku and that they can understand haiku on some level. So you're going to run haiku that are accessible to everybody on some level. You know, when I run Senryu, I love to write Senryu, but when I run it, I'm very careful to run Senryu. If it's Senryu that is humorous, I want to make sure that foreigners understand the humor, because American humor is very different than European humor or humor from you know, some other part of the world. So I'm very careful about the humorous Senryu that I run, because I want everybody to understand the poetry on some level. Now, every once in a while, like 2 or 3 times a year, I invite poets to submit. I make a point of inviting poets to submit previously published haiku. And I do that, like I have the HSA bulletin editor run a notice about that, or I post it on my WordPress blog. I'm looking for submissions, because you want to keep getting new readers and new followers all the time. And if your readers are not followers, that's an incentive to get them to become followers. So have an open invitation announcement every once in a while. Be a friendly blogger and someone that they can relate to and approach. As I said, another popular feature are the instructive essays, teaching people how to do things. Experienced haikuists like to see their name in print. So maybe, you know, as I say, ask them to submit some writing tips or submit some tips on how they're getting effectively published, and ask them just to write 1 or 2 sentence answers to, you know, to a question. Don't impose on their time, and offer them the ability to plug their books or workshops. That's very, very important. Always give somebody something for their time. And recently I've started interviewing haiku poets who have books, and in the interviews I'll run on a particular day, I'll run like 7 of their haiku, I'll run their photo, and I'll run their biography. That's a very popular feature that I do, besides reviewing their books and besides posting news of their awards or writing events or workshops. Another popular feature, as I said, was the survey. Get people involved with the survey. Ask them for a 1-word or a sentence answer. And I find that foreign poets who maybe don't have a very good command of English and yet are able to write haiku and get it published, they like those 1-word survey answers, you know, that they or 1 sentence, because oftentimes they have trouble cranking out a sentence, even though, you know, they seem to get their haiku published. Maybe they have help doing their haiku, I don't know. But that works well with foreign poets. Other popular features, as I said, instruct people on what publicity has worked for you as a haiku poet. You may not have a background as a publicist, but you may know what has worked for you in promoting your books or workshops or whatever. So share that knowledge. Share knowledge of your speaking engagements, how you got to do a reading at a bookstore, you know, who you approach, that sort of thing. Share as much as you can. As I said, run notices about anthologies. They're seeking submissions, and invite people to maybe have an open call. Invite them to submit free verse poems if they write free verse or rhyming poems or whatever. I think that also lately I've been pushing to get more foreign poets involved in my blog, and I've done the same thing for them, which is I run their biography on a certain day. I run a number of their poems, like 7 haiku poems, and I run their photo, and they really like that. Foreign poets like the exposure of getting exposure in a blog in a foreign country. that reaches foreigners. Be accommodating. If somebody says to you, run my notice about something and it's relevant, run it. I ask for previously published haiku and I ask people to submit haiku because I like to have some quality control on what they submit. Every once in a while, I'll get a poet who's never been published, and rather than say no, I try to patch up their haiku for them. So, I can refer them to my book that I've written, Haiku and Senryu, A Simple Guide for All, and I'm not asking them to buy it because they can find it at libraries or they can get it through interlibrary loan. I'm currently focusing on, if you log into my blog, you're going to see a lot of different forms of poetry that haiku poets have written. And that's been working really well. I found that I've gotten a lot more hits lately because I've been doing that. And I strive each week to run a haiku by a haikuist that I've never featured before on my blog. So keep your blog fresh with new haiku coming in all the time from poets that you have never featured before. That's very, very important. Keep people interested. Okay, so what are the benefits? What are the benefits of blogging for you and your readers? The short-term benefits for readers and followers, let's just focus on the short-term benefits. They obviously get to showcase their work. But more importantly, when they see a daily blog, that motivates them to keep writing. That's why writers love daily blogs. It helps them keep their motivation up. Beginners, as we said, learn to write their own poems and get them published through your essays and tips that you offer. And this is a really good short-term benefit. Readers become familiar with certain poets' work. They'll see the work of, they'll recognize the name of a good haiku poet, and they'll start friending them on Facebook and other social media. So your readers are making contacts with other poets, and they join them on Facebook and Twitter and other blogs, and that's really important. Long-term benefits for your readers and followers. When people see that poets are actively engaged in their work and producing books, that motivates your readers and followers to put out a chat book, if they've never done that before. A lot of my readers and followers have said that, they tell me, I see people on your blog and they're actively involved in doing chat books, and that's really motivated me to do a chat book. So I think that a blog is a very good motivational force. And often readers and followers will write to me and ask me for information about things. Like they'll ask me, well, how and where do I get a chat book produced? So my blog is an information source, and that'll get you readers and followers to be an information source. As I said, experienced poets get publicity for their books. If they keep appearing on my blog, they get interviewed by me. So experienced poets use my blog as a networking tool too. If your blog has been running for a year or more, the long-term benefits for readers are that you'll be running their poems multiple times. And their byline will come up repeatedly on my blog search bar. So, readers who don't submit poems to me tell me they aren't at the point where they feel comfortable that, they're writing good haiku, but they become familiar with other poets and they start friending them on other social media, and, they develop friendships with them. Now, the short-term benefits for the bloggers are that, your readers and followers will look for you on other social media like Facebook and Twitter. And the long-term benefits are that you're gaining personal and professional contacts with other poets that you run the work of. And the long-term benefits, too, is, you get them interested in your books. And oftentimes, readers will review your books on their blogs, and or they'll link your blog to their blog, and it's a snowball effect of publicity. you pick up their readers and followers too. So I've got a WordPress blog, and it's wonderful because it has WordPress gives you the opportunity to post your bio and post your books in its book sections, so you have built-in publicity on your WordPress blog. Just want to make a few other points before I take your questions. I think WordPress is great because there is no restriction on the number of words that you can run on your bio page, and there's no restriction on the number of words that you can run on your about page, which is about your blog. So you can really go to town publicizing yourself without, being self-serving and posting notices about what you're doing. The built-in biography will serve you well, and the built-in book section will serve you well with your with the posting of your books. Other long-term benefits for bloggers is that librarians often see my blog. They ask me to give workshops. Teachers invite me to give workshops at schools. I got an invitation to do a monthly poetry column for a lifestyle magazine, and those things come through my blog. Poets and followers get to know you, as I said, and they reblog your posts. So you're constantly making friendships and contacts, and getting book publicity too. Now, every once in a while, I do promote my books, like before the holidays, or maybe 2 times a year I promote my books, and I give people a chance to buy my books for like free shipping, so they're motivated to buy from me and not from Amazon, and that's perfectly legitimate. I mean, you cannot put in the type of time that a blog requires and not get something in return. So it's legitimate to every once in a while publicize your books. And if you don't have a book, having a blog is good, because what you end up doing is once you get a book out there, you already have an audience for it. So it's a blog is a good way of subtly promoting your books. And oftentimes, like if I get a new book review, somebody has reviewed my book somewhere, I post it on my blog and I say, like, here's what reviewers are saying about my books. And it comes out as not being self-serving at all. It's perfectly legitimate. I think that readers and followers are your cheerleaders. They realize that you work hard for them by posting their work on your blog. And so they appreciate that, and they in turn publicize you on their blogs. So, and they're always, they offer you congratulations for your achievements too, when they read about something that you've done in the HSA newsletter. Now, the minimum amount of time for a daily blog where you just post other people's poems is about 3 hours a week. You're going to spend a lot of time tracking people down and asking them if you can run their poems. Make use of your time. You ask them if they've run a poem on their blog that you particularly like, ask them if they can repost that poem on your blog. If you really want exposure and a lot of followers, as I say, I highly recommend to keep reading your stuff. A daily blog is like a newsletter. It's a really effective way of connecting with your audience. Don't make your blog a part-time job. I mean, if you do more than 10 or 12 hours a week, that's too much. It's running into a part-time job. But once you've been doing this for about a year, people are going to be contacting you with their poems and saying, can you post this poem? And that's good, because that saves you a lot of time in pouring through haiku journals and coming up with poems to run. I think the good thing about running a blog is that you're promoting goodwill. You're reaching poets in foreign countries, but don't sacrifice quality. Don't be afraid to say no if you think a poem isn't good or doesn't meet your standards. Blogging is all about networking to build a community of writers for yourself. And it's a way of letting people discreetly know about the work you're doing. And if you have no books to promote, think long-term. Showcase your poems from time to time, but don't make it the focal point of your blog. And as I say, later when you publish a book, you've already got an audience. And minimize your workload. You know, if somebody comes to you and wants you to run their poetry, that's a good way of, you know, cutting back on your time to research other poems to run. If the poems are good, run them. I tell bloggers that basically a blog is more give than take. You know, it's time consuming. It really is, so be prepared for that. Just a few last points too. Be open to your blog evolving. When I started my blog back in 2009, it was a blog for journalistic writing, how to get published in newspapers and magazines. And then it evolved to a haiku blog when I published my first book, Haiku and Senryu. I started getting into haiku to launch my first book. And I thought that was legitimate. It was a good way of getting people to read my book on how to write haiku. So I thought, you know, get them involved by running the daily haiku on your blog. Now, recommended blogging sites, I love WordPress. That's what I'm on. Blogspot is another good blog site to do. And a few other points. Don't be afraid to tweak your blog to get more followers. You know, make your blog timely. I recently ran a piece on how to break down racial barriers through writing art, you know, writing literary art pieces. And I wrote, I thought that was a good blog. It was a timely thing. And lastly, you know, do a reality check. Why do people, as I say, need your blog? Always ask yourself that. And your blog will stand out if you offer people something that other blogs don't. So try to do something that other blogs aren't doing. And if you're an author, you know, the pandemic has changed a lot of things for you. A lot of my readings, poetry readings, have been canceled. My in-person workshops have been canceled. A lot of my poetry exhibits have been canceled, my poetry art exhibits. So blogging is a good way of staying in touch with people. Is there time for any questions? Is there time for any questions?
Yeah, we have about 8 to 9 minutes, Charlotte. Thanks for such an motivational talk. It was really enriching even for professionals. Right now we have Deanne Garcia. She wants to ask a question. Deanne, can you unmute yourself and present your question to Charlotte?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it took a bit of a second for the authority to unmute myself to come through. Thanks so much for your talk, Charlotte. It was really very helpful. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about how to deal with any conflicts that have happened on your blog, or perhaps or some ways perhaps to prevent that.
One conflict is, you know, if people try to work political issues into your blog, you know, and start talking about politics or something. And you know, I ran that piece on breaking down racial barriers through art, and how it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. You know, people appreciate, you know, reading poetry. You reach people of different cultures, and and that sort of thing. And then, you know, people can get off talking about politics or something like that. And, you know, if you're it's your blog, and don't be afraid to tell people if they've gotten off course, because your blog should be something that's entertaining and not something that people can turn into something that's kind of a hard subject to deal with. Your blog, entertainment is the main feature, and use it as a learning tool, but don't get off in don't let people take your blog into peripheral areas that aren't relevant. I don't know if I answered your question. Was that what you had in mind? Diane, was that what you had in mind?
Diane, are you listening? Are you there? I can't see her in the participants. Please unmute yourself.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Sorry. Yes, it did answer my question. Thank you so much.
Next we have Sarita. Sarita, can you hear me? Sarita Martin, please unmute yourself and present your question.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Okay, hi everyone. Let me see, where did my question go? I posted, here we go. Okay, where do you find is a good way to publish haiku books besides online, I mean on the blog? What other places, like magazines, or what venues have you found were good for that?
I didn't understand your haiku books.
Okay, you mentioned publishing haiku books on the blog, but where else do you find is a good vehicle for publishing haiku books? What magazines, or how do you make people aware of your book if you're not doing it on a blog?
Oh, you mean publicity for it?
Uh-huh.
How do you get, well, you do it through events, you know, and now libraries are doing, since they've cut back on in-person events, or not doing in-person events at all, you can do a reading on Zoom, a library reading through Zoom. Libraries are doing a lot of Zoom events. So contact the adult programs person at a library and say, I'd like to do a reading from my new book on Zoom. Can you schedule me? Or I'd like to do a workshop, a haiku workshop on Zoom. Can you schedule me? And they'll do that. You know, they'll do that. That's working very, very well now. I mean, it's not as fun as seeing people in person and signing books at a library event. I mean, the good thing about doing in-person workshops was that you used to be able to sign books and sell books, and librarians would let you do that. Over Zoom, you can't do that now, but at least you're getting your message out about your new book. So I would do that. Also, if you belong to an art league, what they've started doing is, since art exhibits have been canceled in person, they've started posting people's art on their websites. So you've always got to ask people to come up with alternatives for you. Suggest things to librarians, suggest things to art leagues. I'd like to do this. One thing, I find that poets oftentimes are sometimes retiring, and they're not used to doing publicity. But one key thing in doing publicity is you've got to suggest things. People aren't going to come to you, so you suggest things to, you know, whoever it is you're trying to reach. And don't be shy. You may get some no's, but you'll get more yeses than no's.
Good. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. You inspired me.
Okay, thank you, Sarita.
we have time for just one very quick question from Anne Bourgevin. Anne, can you please unmute yourself? Annie Bourgevin, you may please unmute yourself. Time for a quick question.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte, for so much useful and relevant information about blogging. I'm wondering how, when you began this journey of blogging, how did you get to know other people's blogs? It feels like there are millions out there, and I'm wondering how you learned about the way to structure your blog on the basis of reading other people's blogs.
You know, that's interesting, but I was reading other people's blogs, but I came up with my own ideas. Mm-hmm. I asked myself in looking at their blogs, what aren't they offering that I can offer? And because I'm willing to put in more time on my blog than a lot of people are, I thought to myself, well, I think people would like to read about books that other people are doing. I think that they'd like information. As I say, a blog has to be a forum. So you ask yourself, how can I give people information that they need? And that's the key thing. Give people information that they need and come up with features on how you're going to do that, whether you like to write essays or you like to ask. I started out as a journalist in life, so I like to interview people. So I interview writers. I pose questions of writers, and I say, what's the answer to this question? I'd like to give my readers some tips. So just use your own creativity and common sense and come up with things that you'd like to see on a blog. Again, it goes back to asking yourself, what would I like to see on a blog if I were a reader? And, maybe I can ask some haiku poets to join in. I'm always asking haiku poets to do things. I usually come up with their email address through their website. And I'm very forward in asking them, can you appear on my blog? Can you give my readers some tips on how you've been successful at getting published? So fill a gap. If you see that something's not being done on other people's blogs, then do it yourself.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you, Charlotte, so much for being with us. And it was really wonderful to listen to you and the way you answered the questions. It was really helpful. That's all in this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.